This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
The calendar said it was still winter, but nature pays no attention to a calendar hanging on the wall.
Tornado season is year-round, any month, any day. This time this year in early March.
Today is March 2nd. We are chasing a high-risk 30 hatch setup in southern Indiana. We got a line of cells coming out of southern Indiana here, just north of Louisville. We're going to intercept here on I-65 South. It's pretty hazy as you can see, but hopefully we'll get a view of the base once we're a bit closer.
This is Tornado Talk, Madness in March, a historical look back at the outbreak of tornadoes that spanned 2 days, March 2nd and 3rd, 2012. Residents in 13 states would be affected.
This severe weather setup was one that forecasters worried about days in advance. It gave them the opportunity to warn the public well before a threatening cloud appeared in the sky. Brian Good is a meteorologist at Wave 3 TV in Louisville, Kentucky.
That year, we had a leap year. And on that February 29th, we had tornadoes that passed through our viewing area. And while that was impressive, no one was killed from that or injured from that particular event on February 29th. We were so focused on the computer model data that we were getting at that time that was already signifying that on that Friday, the 2nd of March, we were going to be in for one heck of a tornado outbreak. So we were already making our plans. You know, how do we do this? How do we alert the public of what we see coming without, first off, sounding an alarm and causing panic, yet at the same time not downplaying enough to where people ignore the potential and put themselves at harm's risk being out and about? So we had a very careful balance in the TV media especially to try to figure out a way to get the point across without causing everything to be in an uproar. And I think the viewers got a sense from us when we were on television the day before, on March 1st, we were on every newscast, leading with every newscast, saying, this is what the potential we see for the next day. And we were trying to be as serious as we were, but again, not trying to cause a huge panic, trying to educate, really, our viewers of what the potential was. The school system, which is one of the largest in the country here in Louisville, decided they were going to go ahead and do an early dismissal for March 2nd based on that. And normally when we hear about schools making decisions because of what the weather people say, we get negative feedback. That wasn't the case. I think everybody understood why the school systems were making that decision. And so that day we decided we're all going to meet at the station at 8 o'clock in the morning and evaluate the setup at that point. So we all met. Kevin Harnett is our chief meteorologist, and he addressed the newsroom staff. And you know what? I mean, this was something that we didn't air on television or anything, but he was very to the point with the staff and said, let me be very clear. Someone is going to die today. That is how intense this outbreak potential is for today. We need you to be on your A game, pay attention. We're going to make quick decisions and make sure that your families are safe and prepared now, and make sure that, of course, your own self is taken care of for anything that needs to be done for that day. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, we made our plans finalized. We decided we needed to jump on television at some point in the day, and whatever we're going to do, we're going to jump on at that point. Even if it's sunny and not a cloud in the sky, we were going to jump on and stay on, because we knew it'd only be a matter of time before the atmosphere was going to just pretty much explode on itself.
Seth Bonneau is the Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service in Wilmington, Ohio. He says days like March 2nd are extremely rare, but it is what you prepare your whole career for.
When you get into these high-risk days, you walk in the office and the environment is very different. There's a nervous tension. There's a lot of anticipation. You want the event to begin because you want to spring into action.
Skip Talbot is a storm chaser who lives in Springfield, Illinois. He develops software in his day-to-day job. His hobby is tracking storms. After witnessing dozens of tornadoes, Skip made sure he planned for March 2nd, 2012. He and his chase partner Jennifer Brenley-Ubel originally chose northern and central Indiana to be their chase target, but that morning their plans quickly changed.
These incredibly dynamic systems, the speed and location when they eject is pretty variable. That target is always a moving target. It's shifting on us. And that morning, it looked like we were going to have to go further east and further south, which was absolutely our worst case scenario for this chase. It looked like the target area was now setting up along the Ohio River. And that's a terrible place to chase because there's not many river crossings and the terrain gets really bad down there. Lots of hills, lots of trees. It can be quite dangerous to try and approach a storm down there because you don't have the visibility to keep tabs on it.
The first wave of storms began. A warm front attached to a deepening low-pressure system was over the Great Lakes. Warm, moist air combined with extreme wind shear created a volatile air mass. At 9:25 a.m., the first tornado was on the ground doing EF3 damage in Harvest, Alabama. By noon, another twister carved a 9-mile path through Hamilton County, Tennessee. It also produced EF3 damage.
The atmosphere was ripe for explosive development of supercell thunderstorms across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. A couple of hours later, a long-track tornado was about to begin in Washington County, Indiana.
The tornado touched down on the south side of Fredericksburg, Indiana. As the storm moved across farmland, it grew to an EF2, then EF3. The twister crossed U.S. Highway 60 south of New Pekin, causing EF4 damage, destroying Ergo Industries located inside a large factory building. Tornadic winds had reached 170 miles per hour. There was no way that a nearby mobile home could withstand the storm's strength. Inside the home, 5 people were killed.
Not only was the tornado strong, but it was moving so quickly, there was little time to seek shelter or chase it. Skip Talbot explains.
I believe storm motion was somewhere around between 60 and 70 miles an hour for most of these cells. And those are speeds you really can't chase. When you got storms moving that fast, basically what you have to do is pick a spot, get in front of the storm, get your shots as it goes past you, and then get out of the way.
Jennifer Brindley-Ubel had been chasing storms since 2007. She's a professional photographer that makes capturing storm images all the more interesting. She and Skip Talbot were in a race to find a good spot to watch.
When we're chasing a high-risk setup, especially when the storms have really fast forward motion, that's especially in this type of area where there's lots of hills and trees and mountains and rivers, and you don't have a grid with flat plains where you can see for miles. That's the ideal. So when you're chasing in this type of scenario, really the best bet, the safest bet is to find like we call it a perch, like a freeway exit where you're up on top of the highway, and you can watch the tornado as it goes screaming by at 50 miles an hour, and then basically your chase is done.
The long-track killer tornado continued from Washington into Clark County. It fluctuated in intensity as it crossed the county line. Skip Talbot and Jennifer Brindley-Ubel had chosen exit 19 that would take them directly into the community of Henryville, Indiana.
Of course, not knowing what was about to happen to Henryville, we exit at Henryville, and so that was our plan. And we drove into Henryville. We came to a 4-way stop, and our heart just absolutely sank when we came to the stop. The sirens were wailing. We know we're in the path, pretty much the direct path of a supercell that has a history of producing tornadoes. And at this stop, the traffic is all backed up. There are people trying to go in every direction.
And I'm kind of out of breath thinking about it because my heart was just pounding. We're looking around and we see the town here, and there's just end to end these school buses full of children right there, and people are outside, they're on their porches, they're looking around at the sky, they want to get a glimpse of something, what's going on, is there a tornado? People holding up their cell phones, trying to take video, and that always scares me so much because we're just like, holy cow, these people should be underground right now. And then, looking at the radar, we have to analyze the situation. We have to look and say, okay, this is what our roads are doing. This is what our landscape looks like. This is what the terrain is where we are. And there are trees and hills. There's not good visibility to the west of the freeway. It's just all trees. That's not good. And we don't really want to drive through a town full of people. That's also dangerous. In addition to that, looking at the trajectory of the supercell, we figured we're probably in the path here. I said, we need to go south. I would be way more comfortable. Let's just go south a couple miles and see if we can't find a perch, a spot where we can kind of watch the storm as it passes.
The line of school buses that Skip and Jennifer saw in Henryville were full of students who were dismissed early. Troy Albert is the school's principal who saw the storm that was coming and had a plan of action.
About 2:25, I received a call from the superintendent. He said, you got about 30 minutes. It looks like the path is coming directly towards the center of Henryville. That's when we decided to put our evacuation plan in place because the elementary students were on the buses. We have 18 buses. Majority of the kids were already on the bus. There was a lot of kids that had departed that day, that had signed out with their parents and had gone home. We felt like at that point, when I called him, instead of evacuating the buses and bringing him back in the building, that it might be quicker for us to evacuate the high school as well. So we dismissed the high school, and within 5 minutes we were on the road, which put our buses basically pretty much out of harm's way. Angel Perry and bus 211 saw the tornado from the four-way stop and came back to the school. And so we evacuated the 11 students and her and brought them into the school and got in a safe spot. And that was approximately about 3:10 to 3:12, somewhere in there. I spent one last call on the PA system before the electricity went out to anybody that was left in the building that I had not rounded up and was with us, to take shelter and get in a safe spot and follow our tornado readiness plan.
Meteorologist Brian Good at Wave 3 TV in Louisville was tracking the storm as it got closer to Henryville, Indiana. When his weather team saw a live video stream of the tornado, they feared the worst.
When that signature was moving through and we were getting reports of debris flying into the air, we were seeing a storm chaser video. The storm chaser video was a live feed in our studio. And at one point, I looked over at Kevin, and it was the first image we had, a confirmation of it being on the ground visually, was that storm chaser video we had pumped up in our studio. And I said, Kevin, look. And he stopped what he was doing at the chroma key green screen with the radar behind him. And he stopped. He goes, what? I said, look. And we punched up the storm chaser video at that moment. And there's this wedge, this tornado on the ground near the gas station at the Henryville exit. This is before the town got hit, but it was heading right for it. People, unfortunately, are going to get hurt because we knew how massive this was. And, you know, we don't normally rate, of course, tornadoes until we get the damage reports and we rate them by the EF scale. But at the same time, we kind of have an idea as meteorologists what the potential strength is, too, visually. But looking at it visually, we knew this was one that unless you were underground, the potential for you to get hurt was going to be high. We knew it was going to be up there close to the 4 range. How do you tell people that? I mean, we try to do our best we can to, you know, in previous moments before that to get everybody in their safe spots. But at this point, we just warned everybody, don't try to leave your home. You know, it's too late. If you're in an unsafe area, just try to find the safe spot and take shelter until it passes through, because there's not much you can do now. It's coming.
Storm chaser Skip Talbot and Jennifer Brindley-Ubel had parked just 2 miles south of the tornado's path near Memphis, Indiana.
But we could tell it was hitting things. There were power flashes. So we knew this was a long track and significant tornado, even before we were able to really see it ourselves. And as it came into view, we could just tell it was a super strong and significant tornado. And as it passes in front of us, we just get an incredibly dramatic view. We watched it pass to the north. The funnel briefly retreated, but it still left a big debris swirl at the ground. So we knew the tornado was still in progress, even though the funnel wasn't on the ground. And as it moved to the north, we repositioned to get our view back. And we had just great view of the supercell structure, the RFD clear slot, a big stovepipe tornado, more power flashes. And it was right about that time that it was entering Henryville. And we didn't know it at the time. We didn't know where the tornado was tracking. We're a couple miles away from it, so we don't know exactly what it's hitting. And so all we can do is just watch this tornado. We don't know how bad it is. And so, yeah, that's when it started to do really, really significant damage. And we made a really futile attempt to try and catch back up with the tornado at that point. We moved back to I-65 North, and we were going to try to go back up towards Henryville to get our shot back. And that storm was moving just so fast that there was no way to keep up with it. Once you fall behind, basically that's it. We tried anyways. Going on to the on-ramp to I-65 North, some driver, probably listening to the radio, which is, you know, a really great thing, realized what was happening up ahead. Somebody was actually trying to back down the on-ramp. They were going in reverse down the on-ramp, trying to get off of the highway and get out of there. So we had trouble getting on the highway. And then once we saw the traffic doing that, once we realized the tornado had already crossed the highway, we realized, this is a bad idea. If we get on the highway and drive up there, we're just going to see debris strewn across the highway, and we're going to get stuck in all kinds of traffic and emergency vehicles. We don't want to hinder the emergency response. We just need to get out of here at this point.
The tornado had caused EF4 damage in the town of Henryville. The town's middle and high school had taken a direct hit, with Principal Troy Albert inside. He vividly remembers riding out the storm.
The tornado then hit, and it hit the north side of the building first, and it dropped the ceiling of the gyms and damaged the north end of our building. It hit the front of the building and knocked out the two-story in the south end of the campus. And it took out all the two-story, which I'm thankful that there was no kids in there. And it just basically flattened it. And then the cafeteria, the library, the group presentation room, which is like a small, large group learning place that could hold up to 200 people, it was all flattened. But where we were located, we were in a narrow hallway. We were all together. There were 39 with me, and there were 36 with the elementary in their office and nurses area, which was the safest area we thought at the time. I'm glad we had two-way radios to communicate because we were able to communicate with the two groups. And then we were evacuated approximately, I would say, 3:30, 3:35.
But relatives of some of the children did not know for sure if everyone was safe. Ironically, Brian Good at Wave 3 TV grew anxious, knowing that he too had family in Henryville.
For me, it was really personal because my brother lives in Henryville, and he has two daughters. They both go to Henryville. The school is divided between the elementary portion and the high school portion, and they're both in that same section. And I knew they were going to be in that school at that day, and as the storm is hitting Henryville, I'm sitting there thinking, I hope they're all okay, and I'm just paying attention to everything I could about the radar signatures. And then all of a sudden my mom started to call me on my cell, and my mom knows what's bothering me during severe weather coverage. And I said, this is something big. So I actually, on the air, I said, I'm sorry, I got to excuse myself for a minute. I have to answer this. It's my mom. So I ran out of the studio into the hallway, turned my mic off, answered the call. My mom was upset and crying. She says, Brian, we can't get a hold of your brother. We know that your nieces were on the school buses, and we don't know where they are now. And I had to calm my mom down because she had another supercell that was a weaker version of it, but it triggered a tornado signature at Fort Knox. It was heading toward my mom. So I had to get her to calm down and say, Mom, you need to get in your safe spot. Take care of yourself. We'll worry about everything when we can. It's just try to get through it and protect ourselves the best we can with the activity moving through. And I got back on the air, and it took until later that night before I was able to track them down. Thankfully, they were okay. My eldest niece was on one of the buses that came back to the school. She is still very traumatized by the event. I mean, they were very, very fortunate and lucky that their home was okay and that all their friends were fine, but it just really changed their outlook on it. And it really affected me in a sense that, you know, there's this careful balance of trying to be professional on television in a crisis like this. At the same time, you're worried about your own family. It's a very personal event that takes place, and that one was, it just really hit home.
Henryville Principal Troy Albert was relieved that the school safety plan worked.
We had 0 injuries on the campus. We had one fatality. Regretfully, a neighbor of mine that lives about a mile away from me, and he was the uncle of one of my teachers at the time, so it was very emotional at that point. But I will tell you that I think the community itself had some people that were severely injured, but for the most part, we lucked out, and we did not have very many injuries or casualties.
Troy's neighbor was killed when the tornado took a direct hit on a modular home. Wayne Hunter and his wife had taken shelter, but knew well in advance that the tornado was headed their way. Brian Good said he also knew the family.
Lenore Hunter was one of our viewers that we had talked to before several times. She'd, give us weather reports, prior to this tornado event. And, her and her husband, there's video of that where, he was real curious about tracking tornadoes, and they both were filming it with their own video camera from their house. And she even commented on the video, you know what, I think we need to get downstairs. We need to get away from this. And unfortunately, he lost his life. The tornado hit him head on. And she's a very brave woman. She did speak to us afterward, but obviously she's just completely devastated. And to watch that video back over and over, knowing that there were doing something a lot of us do. We film weather events, whether it's a rainbow or a tornado. We want to film it because we're intrigued by it, excited about it. And that was one of those moments you felt while watching this home video of them filming the tornado. You had no idea that for him, these were going to be the last moments of his life.
In an interview with CNN, Lenora Hunter said she and her husband Wayne video recorded the tornado until it was so close they had to run for cover.
We knew we was going to be hit, and it wasn't going to be pretty. We hunkered down, put the blanket over us, and we just hugged. We just got there. And his head and body was up against me here. We had arms around each other. He said, "I love you," and I said, "I love you too."
Neighbors began looking for the hunters in the rubble.
So we ran in the house and flipped the wall off of her and got her out, and she instantly started saying, "My husband, my husband." Well, right next to her, we looked and we could see his feet underneath the refrigerator.
And I knew, I just knew when he was laying there like that he didn't make it.
Simultaneously, a new cyclic tornado vortex rapidly formed from the same supercell immediately southwest of the first tornado. The second tornado quickly intensified, causing EF3 damage as it tore through the southern portion of Marysville. Wave 3 TV's Brian Good remembers getting the news just moments after that happened.
And I remember when we were doing the coverage and we were tracking the supercell, I was handed a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper was a handwritten note from our assignment desk, and it said, "The town of Marysville is no more." That's all it said. And I'm thinking, I have to read this? I mean, it was a very emotional thing to say, but this is coming from a factual base here from the assignment desk. So our chief meteorologist, Kevin, looked over, and he knew I had something in my hand that was given to me. He said, "Brian, I understand you got some new info. What do you got?" I said, "Well, Kevin, I have to read this, but apparently the town of Marysville is no more. It's been destroyed." And everyone just got quiet in studio. I mean, the reality, we've all gone through tornado outbreaks, but in our careers, we never really, I don't think, have been through something as intense as what was happening at that moment. And you could drop a pin at that moment. It was just a serious effect that it had on us, and a very emotional one.
Back in Henryville, the severe weather threat had not ended. Just 15 minutes after the community suffered EF4 damage, Wave 3 TV's Brian Good said another tornado targeted the town.
As the tornado went through and Henryville got hit, the supercell began to weaken as it headed toward far northern Kentucky, and then the second one came in right on its heels, and it didn't waste any time whatsoever. And that second tornado was weaker, but it was still producing. We were getting reports of large hail with it, and we're like, oh no, is this going to take the exact same path? I mean, how crazy is this? This town's going to get hit twice. And I think the hail laying down in front of it from the previous tornado, I think, helped and create much of an aversion with that tornado that it really didn't have a chance to stay on the ground much. I think that was good. So they kind of helped each other out in that sense, but it was scary for a while to see the two move through the southern Indiana corridor. And of course, we're thinking to ourselves, if this only had been, even 20 miles to the south, what would have happened going through the city like that? How scary that would have been, even more so.
The supercell responsible for the first Henryville tornado was still producing a twister that destroyed several homes east of Marysville, Indiana. Debris was tossed a mile away. In Scott County, Indiana, 3 homes were severely damaged as the storm continued on its path. That's where 1 person died. More destruction occurred in Jefferson County, Indiana, near the town of Chelsea. The storm claimed 4 more lives there.
The multi-vortex tornado crossed the Ohio River in Jefferson County, Indiana. This is where the tornado finally ended. Its 49-mile path would conclude in Trimble County, Kentucky, just 4 miles north-northwest of Bedford.
Back in Henryville, Indiana, the small-knit community had lost cell service and was using old-fashioned ways to communicate. Henryville Principal Troy Albert said his primary concern was reuniting his students with families.
So we were just relying on word of mouth, four-wheelers, students on four-wheelers coming back to see if they could help, bringing blankets to some of the kids that got wet in the transition from walking over. It was just, everybody helped out each other, and it was like all of a sudden we became a close-knit community looking out for each other instead of just for yourselves. And I felt like that was probably the biggest thing that I think we've taken out of that tornado and it even continues today.
Storm chaser Skip Talbot says the long-track tornado that occurred on March 2nd, 2012, which claimed 11 lives, is the deadliest he's ever seen. Skip knew there was a way for the storm chase community to offer help to those affected by tornadoes.
We started talking with other storm chasers right after that event, thinking, okay, as chasers saw something that had a huge impact on people were killed, we were there, we documented, and we felt guilty about that. Some of us are going there to see a tornado for the thrill of it. Some of us are going there and selling our footage to make money. And we thought, how can we give back to these people who are impacted by the weather that we're documenting? I mean, as storm chasers, there's nothing we can do about the weather. It's going to happen. It's going to impact these people. But, you know, as good human beings, how can we try to help these people that get hit by the weather that we are watching? We got together, several of us from across the country started formulating ideas, and we thought, okay, we can make this charity group that acts as a fundraiser, and we can sell whatever products we can make from what we do as storm chasers to try and give back something to these tornado victims. So Storm Assist was born a few months after that event. Later that year, we put out T-shirt and DVD and Blu-ray fundraisers based on the stuff that storm chasers are doing, the shots we're getting, the photos and video we're taking. We're going to sell that for a charity fundraiser event.
Today, StormAssist.org has collected thousands of dollars for storm victims. The organization was able to help many that were impacted that March day.
For those who lived through the tornado outbreak, it will be impossible to forget. A number of communities suffered losses. Wave 3 TV's Brian Good visited Marysville, Indiana, 6 months after the tornado.
And it was just abandoned. You know, there was no sense of wanting to rebuild at that time. Everything had just been left. I found a refrigerator that had been thrown a good, I would say, 1,000 yards away from the house that it was in. That is no more. And to stand there in this area that had a little small store, and you have the church, and you had the houses and the community, you can see where the community was. But then you also sensed that it was suddenly a deserted town. And it was sad because there was just a lot of hopelessness feeling to a lot of the residents. A lot of them left. They just couldn't deal with it, or they didn't want to deal with it being there anymore and being reminded of that area. So they just packed up and decided to move somewhere else and rebuild. Now, since then, there have been some that have decided to build their homes back up, and I think that is starting to grow more and more, that we get further away from the event. But for a while there, that town really struggled to actually stay on the map.
In Henryville, Principal Troy Albert said not one student moved away. Construction was immediate on a brand new school.
Belfour Restoration Services put our building back with the assistance of Hanover Insurance and had a master plan to rebuild our school, and it wanted to be the first thing that was rebuilt in our town. We started construction probably the week after the tornado. We were cleaning out the debris and everything like that, and we were back in school on August 5th. Basically 5 months, $54 million. It just was a remarkable task. I'm thankful for every day that has happened, because it got normalcy back to our school.
Those in southern Indiana have moved on with their lives, but Henryville, Indiana School Principal Troy Albert says he wants to be just as prepared in case this would ever happen again.
Once you go through it, you don't want to go through it again. I invite my weather people back to talk to my kids about every other year, just to share on what's the chances that it would happen again. We're a 1% chance that it will ever happen again, but I think we're ready if it does happen. I will say the students take tornado drills, fire drills, evacuation drills very seriously now, and they know what it means, and I hope that continues, because it's really helpful for my staff and the parents to know that everybody's safe.
Next on Tornado Talk, over 300 tornado warnings were issued across 13 states on March 2nd and 3rd, 2012, including Georgia, North Carolina, and in the community of West Liberty, Kentucky. Stories of safety, survival, and how social media keeps affected communities connected. Part 2 of Madness in March on episode 32 of Tornado Talk.